So, a proper welcome to our webinar. What we're going to be talking about is monitoring and supporting students on StepsWeb. Now, this is actually something I'm quite passionate about, and I have to admit it's partly because I often don't see it done terribly well. Now, I don't mean that as a criticism. From my years in the classroom, I know perfectly well how busy teachers are. So what I'm going to focus on today is showing you quick, easy and effective ways of monitoring your learners. We'll go through a number of learners, identify their difficulties, show you how to support them. So I hope this is going to be a useful session for everybody. So I'm going to share my screen now and show you our demo account of StepsWeb. Right. Now, you're now looking at our StepsWeb account. Now, the very first thing I'm going to show you is look down here where we've got notifications. This is already telling me something about my students. Let's click on them and find out what. So those students are overdue on assigned work. These ones, however, have completed that assigned work. And this one's handy too. If we click on here, this is telling me this student has completed level 8. And if I click on here, I can print out his certificate. It will be a named certificate which will show exactly how many bronze, silver and gold medals that student has achieved. So that's just a very quick and easy way of getting notifications for your students. So let's go into our classes now. Now you'll see here I've got a demo class 1 and a demo class 2. The other thing you're probably noticing is that they come under a favourites heading. This is also quite important. If you have favorited one of your classes, they will appear under a favourites heading over here, handy for finding them, particularly if your school has got lots of classes. But the other advantage is, if you have favorited classes, you will only get notifications about those students. In other words, not about all of the students on your account. And to favourite a group is very, very easy. I'm going to click on a class, click here to favourite it, and now you can see that is also underneath my favourites column. Very easy to do. So we're going to use demo class 2 for an example. Now, all of these profiles are genuine profiles. Obviously they've been anonymised, but these are the issues that are coming up regularly in schools. So these are quite typical ones that we can learn some strategies on. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find out what our class is currently doing. To do that, go to Monitor. Aha! Right, look what we can see here. We can see all of the students who are online. So for example, Kim is online. She's just been made a couple of errors. Haha! This student is online, but hasn't done anything for the last 6 minutes. I think I might take a walk down my classroom and find out what he's actually doing. Another student here is doing the word search. Oh, and I've got a student here who's having difficulty. And it shows me which activity. So this student is having difficulty with the word building activity. That obviously is a hint for me to go and find out what's going wrong. And you can see the same sort of information about other students. I've got another student here who's been a bit idle. I think I'll send him a message. Whoops. Better if I can spell it, isn't it? There we go. And he's now had that message. You can see how handy that is. In fact, actually, I was just going to show you, we'll just have another quick look at that, because I was also going to show you there's a filter option here. We can see all of the students who are in activities, any ones who are idle, online students, offline students, and any with high errors. So we can use that to filter that screen. Now that is obviously a very useful screen when you're actually in front of your class. And we've seen some teachers actually display that screen on the board so that everybody can see who's working and who's not. The only thing I would counsel about that is it also shows when a student is making lots of errors, so you may not want to do it in a display format like that because of that reason. So anyway, let's have a look now at a bit more information about our class. Now, we can, of course, see where every one of our students is. We've got a very small class here. I can hover over any point to see the student name and the chronological age and spelling age at any point. But this, weekly goals, is your most useful tool. And I'm serious about that. This, for the current week, you can see top right-hand corner, is telling me exactly what my students have been doing this week. And it is important to look in a bit more detail to explain what some of this information is showing you. Now, as you know, the activity goal, the weekly goal for students, is set according to their needs when they've done that first assessment. Some students will be on 10 activities a week, some will be on 20, and some you may have adjusted. You can see that Bert is only going to be doing 12 activities a week. So you can adjust this. And I can see here what their progress is for that week through their weekly goals. We can also look at previous weeks, right up to 12 weeks ago. But let's look at the current week again. The other important aspect here is accuracy. And you can see that any score below 85% comes up in red, and that is definitely meant as a warning. The other aspect which is important, and this is often misunderstood, is time spent. Now, we've had a number of quite, sort of amusing emails saying, oh yeah, but you know, I know that this student was on the programme for 30 minutes, but it says he's only done 5. So what's gone wrong? I think, actually, nothing's gone wrong. He might have been sitting in front of his computer for 30 minutes. He might even have been logged into StepsWeb for 30 minutes, but he was only actively engaging with StepsWeb for 5. And that is what this column is showing you. And incidentally, as soon as students realise that you can see when they've been off task, that's a good enough incentive for quite a few of them to stop doing it in the first place. So this is telling you the amount of time they were actively using the program. Now, let's look in a bit more detail. We can see here Dave has got a few problems. 84%, not disastrous, but let's see what's going wrong. Aha. So he's been struggling with word search. He had a little bit of difficulty with spelling quiz. Let's see the errors he made. And he had a lot of difficulty with drop. So this is telling me the students who are having difficulty with that particular week, and we are going to follow up on these in a bit more detail in a moment. But let's look at Elon. Okay, so, this is also quite interesting. He's been doing find the letter, and he managed to make 33 errors. Let's have a look at them. So for the letter A, when he was finding the letter A, those are his attempts. Actually, to make 33 errors in an activity like that, you can't do that unless you are actively avoiding the correct answer. So I know he's been messing around. Gives us quite useful information on him. And incidentally, we are going to look at these students in a bit more detail in a moment. And let's look at the other one who's struggling at the moment, 73%. This is interesting too. Find the word, 1 error. Sentence builder, quite a few errors. So let's have a look at the kind of errors this student is making. This is an activity where they're putting words into a sentence. You can see this is a genuine attempt. Addition is opposite of the subtraction. So a bit of language difficulty here, but a genuine attempt. Now, there are obvious things we can point out here. The first one that probably comes to everybody's mind is your full stop comes at the end of the sentence. That's a good strategy. And your capital letter at the beginning. So that's something which is going to help you on here. But I can see here that one of those comprehension activities, one of those language activities, is causing difficulty. Label the picture. Right, this particular list happens to be a maths one, where we're identifying and learning the meaning of maths terminology. So I can see my learner is having difficulty with those. Choose the word is where they choose the appropriate word to go in context. So what you can see here is that I can see exactly what that student has done during that week. Again, choose the word as the difficulty and then sentence builder again. So this is indicating to me that this student may well have a difficulty with language comprehension. And we'll have a look at how we support that student. So this weekly goals sheet is your most useful tool. What it's going to show you is who is doing what, who is not doing what, who's having difficulty and what those difficulties are for this particular week. And if we look at the previous week, we notice there are some other difficulties that we haven't seen again. Let's look over here. Drop. Now that's one of the activities which is particularly challenging. And at this point it's probably appropriate to explain something crucial about StepsWeb. In comparison with, actually to be honest, every other program of its type that I've looked at, StepsWeb makes more of a demand on the cognitive and information processing skills. This is a deliberate aspect. We do want learners to learn strategies, to be able to apply them, to develop things like memory, and develop problem-solving skills. So that is why some of our activities can be more cognitively challenging than other programs include. Now this has two effects. Firstly, this is why we see a huge gain in cognitive achievement for students working on StepsWeb. There are a number of case studies on our website which will show that in as little as 6 months, with struggling students, we've seen as much as a 24-month gain in verbal reasoning skills, and even more on non-verbal reasoning skills, what we'd actually think of as IQ. And we've had frequent comments from teachers saying they've seen the same gains in maths as they have in English. Now, drop is one of those activities which does have greater cognitive demands. And although we have the advantage of incorporating activities which develop cognitive skill, it also places a bit more responsibility on the teacher. Because if the teacher doesn't notice that that student is struggling, that student can struggle and, to be honest, wait quite a lot of time without even developing those core skills. So there are a number of activities which do need special support in some cases. At the moment, we're looking at how to identify those activities when a student is having difficulty, but in just a moment we're going to look at how to support. Another student who's having difficulty, Tom, let's see what he's having difficulty with. Okay, 4 in a row, no particular pattern there. And the other one who, we've already looked at the other ones. So this is giving me the current week, the previous week, and we could go back up to 12 weeks. So I've now seen that one of the students who's having difficulty is Elong. So let's go back and look at him in more detail. We're going to filter by class. This is our demo class 2. And this is the first student that we identified as having a potential difficulty. Now there's several things here that give us more information. Firstly, we can see that breakdown of accuracy for reading and spelling, comprehension and language, phonic knowledge and skills, and phonological awareness. And to see those more effectively, change the time frame from start to now. And now he's only just started on the program, but normally we would see a lot more comprehensive information coming up. Here is our weekly goal that we've just been looking at, but here we can see all of his logs. So when we click on here, now we'll just make it last 52 weeks. This student is a fairly new student. What we can see is all of the errors from the time when he started the program. And we'll see a bit more of a pattern with students who've been on the program for longer. Now, the other thing that I always look at when I look at this screen is test results. So let's have a look. Now, he did the spelling test. It tells us the date. and we can view the results. And again, it sometimes surprises me how few teachers actually look at this. Haha. So do we know that Elong has a spelling age of 5? No, we don't. He's just simply messed around. And as I say, this is a genuine profile. Don't forget to take a look at that when they've done a test. So what would I do with this student? Well, I would have a word with him and I would say, look, I am going to reset the test, and this time you're going to do a proper job. You're going to make an effort to do it. And I would sit there and watch him doing it. To set the test, edit, login tests, spelling placement test. Now, in this particular case, I am going to click place in course with result, because the purpose of this test is to get a genuine idea of his literacy level and to place him in the course. What I would say is do not click this button for standard retests. And I'll show you another quite shocking example of what can go wrong if you do. So it comes up with a warning: student will lose medals if placed behind their current position. Not likely to happen in this particular case, but I am setting that retest to get a genuine result and a genuine placement on the course. I would then click save, and next time he goes in he would have to reset that test. Okay, let's look at the other students that we'd identified. We'd identified that Kim was having difficulty. Now let's have a look at her longer term activity. Here we go. We'll start from the beginning. Right, she was making an effort in those early stages, had a real difficulty with vowel ladder. Again, we can see the errors. And again, this is one of those activities which does place a slightly higher cognitive demand. And what you can see here is that actually those errors are very random. Maybe this learner hasn't figured out that they can't just place letters at random, they have to be real words. We need to do a bit more investigation on that. A little bit of problem with word grid, but let's go on through. Okay, choose the word. This is one of our comprehension activities. Now let's have a look at some of the errors in spelling. Okay, so it looks like genuine errors. She's had a go. Word building, difficult. Reading practice, another one of the comprehension aspects. Choose the word, another comprehension activity. And what I know about this student is that this student is an English language learner. So there are a number of things that I would do to support this student. And I'll come on to those in a moment when we go through. Again, definitions, definitely an English language issue. So what I can see here is the pattern here is that our learner is struggling with that comprehension aspect. If we look at the find the picture, we can see again this learner is also on that maths unit that we saw just now and doesn't know the maths terminology. So look at the number of times that student has attempted that activity. We should really have picked that difficulty up at an early stage and been able to intervene. She's gone back to see if she can do it again and again and again and again. You can see the pattern. So those two activities, that student did an entire session without completing a single activity. So we can see that this learner is really struggling with the comprehension aspects. And it's important when we look at things like this to realise that our spelling score doesn't tell you everything about a student. Of course it doesn't. What it does is it gives a good indication of what that student understands about text. And that is, with most students, a good indicator of where they should go on the course. But with an English language learner, for example, or another learner with particular comprehension difficulties, the danger is that this student might have been reasonably competent with spellings. So you can see difficulty with homophones already. By, right. So this student might be reasonably good at the spelling aspects, but be struggling with the comprehension aspects. And I'll show you two things that I would do here. Firstly, this is a student who I would move back in the course because her need from the course is the language and the comprehension aspects, not so much the spelling aspects. Our student at the moment is, let's have a look at their level, level 8. Don't be afraid to move a student back 2 or even 3 levels. The difference between one level and the one immediately next to it is not that significant, but the difference between 2 or 3 levels is much more noticeable. In this particular case, my knowledge of the student would come in and I would choose to move that student back to level 6. There's another setting that you might want to consider. If we scroll down here, there is an English language learner setting. What this does is it eliminates some of the more challenging individual phoneme activities, which changes the emphasis onto much more emphasis on comprehension and language. So I'm going to set that English language learner setting for my student. And then of course we click Save. It does give you a warning. It is going to delete her progress beyond that point, but her progress was problematic anyway. So you click, yes, I agree, and carry on. And obviously it would be important to talk to the learner, explain what you've done and why, that it's not a criticism, it's just making an adjustment so that she can concentrate on the literacy aspects. Okay, let's have a look at one of our other students that we'd identified as a problem. Let's have a look at Dave. Where is Dave gone? Here we go. Now again, we'll look at his longer term logs. Starting from the beginning. Okay, doing quite well. Choose the word, quite a few errors. Again, still errors. Spelling, a few errors here. We'll scroll on through. So he's struggling a bit, but not significantly. Not necessarily a learner who I would choose to move back, but what I might be doing instead is talking through strategies for some of these activities. And we'll come on to that in just a moment. But we can tell quite a bit in terms of the errors that a student makes. So for example, let's have a look at this session. Right, spelling quiz, let's have a look at his errors. Easel, disguise, disease. So he got extra practice with those words and made 3 different errors again with disease. Okay. So what he's doing is he's not actually paying attention to the corrections and the extra practice that he's given. So we might need a little bit of practice on here. And I can also identify that he's having difficulty with vowel ladder as well. So you can see here that we get a lot of information. Again, we've got repeated mistakes with this learner. Omission, possession, promptly makes the same mistakes with the same words. And then again with the same words. So there's a strategy issue that we could be tackling with this learner as well. Now there's a particularly good example of a student who's having real difficulty with particular activities, and this one is one of the ones that we looked at him very briefly just a moment ago. So choose the word and sentence builder, yes. Sentence builder difficulty again. So again, these are comprehension activities which are causing difficulty. So he might be one of those students that I would choose to move back. His overall accuracy is quite low, so moving back perhaps 2 levels might be a good idea. But here we have a specific difficulty, vowel ladder. He's another one of those students who is really struggling with this activity. And as I say, we're going to look at how to support in just a moment. And again, we get repeated errors with the same words. Sometimes just explaining a simple strategy like spell the word when you can see it in front of you. Spell it out loud. Say it to yourself. Actually spell the letters. Create that memory. And here, again, he's got quite a lot of difficulty with drop. Quite sustained difficulty with drop. We'll have a look at that. So what we've been looking at is how we first identify the struggling students to look at in more detail from this weekly goals page, current week, previous week, other ones. And then we've looked in more detail to see exactly what the longer term problems are for each of those students. There's a handy way of looking at longer term patterns as well. If we go to reports and open report, this is enabling us to compare the progress for those students. And what we can see here is that we can see exactly what their scores have been over a longer term. And actually this has identified another student who's got particular difficulties. And if I wanted to see those difficulties, I could simply click. Okay, he tried Sentence Builder, wasn't able to do it. Find a picture. So I can click on these elements as well. And what this also does is it enables you to see a summary of the total number of activities a student should have done over the period they've been working on the program versus the number of activities they have actually done. Now, if your student is achieving less than half of the activities that they should be completing, don't expect particular progress. What we should be aiming for is that as consistently as possible that student is achieving their weekly goal. If they aren't, then they're achieving as close to that as possible. Those students who do a few activities now and then, we're not going to see any particular help with. We won't be able to see genuine progress. Now, there's one more student here that I do want to take a look at before we look at the strategies for supporting these. And again, this is a genuine profile. I'm going to look at the logs for this student, and I think you might be quite shocked. Right, so this student, actually if we'd gone back further, let's go custom range. Let's just put a date way back in the past. Doesn't matter because it'll show us everything that they've done since then. So we can see here, this student started at level A. Now I'm going to zip through here very quickly, please excuse me doing this, but you can see they're working through level A, working all the way through level B. You can see the number of activities this student has done. And I'll whiz through here as well and show you that they also went through level C. Here we go, starting level C, working through that as well. And we're getting to it in just a moment. Look, our learner has completed levels A, B and C and then gone back to level A. So how the heck did that happen? Let's take a look. Right, when that student initially did their test, they were placed on level A. A year later, that teacher did a retest. And funnily enough, they scored about the same. And that teacher, when they did the retest, clicked that place in course with result. Let's remind you where that is. They clicked place in course with result, which I've said, do not click this for retests. Because if this setting is on and a student just happens to have a bit of a bad day, they can lose a huge amount of progress. Like this student. He's gone back to repeating those 3 complete units that he's already done. Now, the other thing, of course, is look at those results. So let's see why he didn't apparently make any progress between the first and the second test. Messing around, would you agree? So let's look at the original test. So that learner's year on StepsWeb has probably been a total waste of time. Now, because I'm conscious of the time here, we're coming up to the half-hour point, and we haven't had any questions yet, but I do want to leave time for questions. Let's look at how we can support with those students. Now, one of the things that is most useful for here is the student simulator. Now, if you go in here, let's imagine that we have identified students who are having difficulty with vowel ladder. Now there is a reference list, excuse me while I refer to this, which tells you where you will find a good example of vowel ladder. It's telling me, and I'm referring to my list at the moment, that on level 9, 5A, I will find vowel ladder. Here we go. There it is. So what I might consider doing, and I might actually consider doing this one activity at a time in front of all of my group in the early stages, is go through it together. For this, we'll put it on a medium speed perhaps, and explain the activity. Explain also that you can hover over to check that it is a real word before clicking to drop it. And explain that if you simply guess, as I'm doing here, you will lose a previous word. So all of these words, in theory, should be easy for your student, or not easy maybe, but very achievable for your students to be able to do. They are carefully chosen to be appropriate for that level. And so what you can imagine me doing is having this on my screen in front of my class, or maybe I'm just showing this to one student, talk through how to do that activity, and then my student goes back to their own computer and carries, or device, and carries on. While we are here, I can see we've got a drop as well, so let's have a look at that one as well. Think about strategies. Now, the difficulty here is I can't hear the sound on here to see what the word is, but you will hear the word. You can also click to hear the sentence. And the intriguing thing about this is that I have seen repeatedly students kind of assuming that they're expected to know by magic where that letter goes. What all of us actually do is spell that word out loud to ourselves and work it out before dropping the letter in the right place. As simple as that. By the time a student is doing drop, they have already done spelling activities with all of those words, so they are not unfamiliar words. And if a student is having particular difficulty with that activity, there's nothing wrong with them using a bit of rough paper, writing that word down, and then using that to refer. And there is a very, very useful reference system on here. If we go into our support site and go to using StepsWeb, there is a section on scaffolding techniques for activities that cause particular difficulty. So these will give you advice about how to talk through the right strategies for each one of those activities. So that support site is also available to help you identify and support through difficulties. So that is the simulator, which you will find on this screen. Simply click Simulator, Start Simulator, and you can choose the levels from here. If you have a look back on our main website where we have the webinar information, you will find downloadable copies of reference sheets which will show you exactly where to find examples of all of the activities at 3 different levels, and you can use that as reference. And of course what we could also do is look for the exact list and activity that that particular student was struggling with. Go through it together and then they do it themselves. So I know this has been a very short and sweet session. I hope it's been a useful session. Please contact us if you do need any extra help on here. Just bear with me a second because I can see that the question has come through. Okay, the question actually is a technical one. Does StepsWeb work on mobile phones? My student had trouble reading his activity on the screen. Actually, technically, yes, it does. It is not, however, designed for phones. There are 1 or 2 activities that will work satisfactorily on a phone, but the text cannot possibly be big enough to be practically useful. Your students really need a bigger screen. A device, iPad for example, Chromebook, or of course computer. So it is not likely to be successful using a mobile phone. Now, that's the only question that's come through so far. I'm going to stay online for a moment and hang fire in case other questions come through, so do feel free to send them through. While we do that, what I might actually do is just go through some of those other support articles just to show you again where they are and the kind of information they're showing you. So that was the scaffolding techniques we were looking at here. So sound splits, for example, is another challenging activity for many of your students. Incidentally, if you have a student with difficulty with sound splits, I teach them to use their hand. Use one finger for each sound. So the example here is friend. F, e, n, d. Then they know that it's 5 sounds, and then they can link those sounds to the letters that make those phonemes. So on here, as I say, you will get reminders and some interesting information about supporting that. And there's another question that's just come through here. Where do you find the support site? Good question, thank you for that. Now here, this is what we call the educator welcome screen. This is the screen we've been looking at to look at students. You will find that in the top right corner here. Let me go through it a little bit more slowly to show you. So that takes you directly to the support site. Also, if you are on our overall, in fact, let's go back on here. If you are on our STEPS website, I'll just open the main site and show you where to find it. Under here, under the support button here, click down on support site and you will see the same thing. Right, there's another query come through here. We regularly test spelling after each unit is completed. I have a dyslexic child who struggles with writing. Is it okay to do the test on a Google Doc? I'm not actually sure what you mean by you regularly test spelling after each unit, to be perfectly honest, because that is automatically being tested for you with the activities. Let me show you what I mean. When we go in, let's have a look at the simulator. The activities that are here, when they do spelling quiz, that is a spelling test. Spelling is a teaching activity for spelling, but spelling quiz is your test. That is your spelling test. You don't need to do an additional test. I'm not sure then quite how to answer the second bit. Is it okay to do the test on a Google Doc? I mean, as I say, you don't need to do a spelling test for your students. It is automatically done for you on their ordinary device. So I hope that's answered the question on there. So a lot of people don't understand that that there is no more need to do spelling tests with your students. The spelling test is automatically done for you with that spelling quiz. And of course you have all the detailed answers for that as well. So I'm just going to hang on for a few more moments in case other questions come through. But while we are waiting, you can see here with that simulator, I can choose any of these activities. So I can go into any level of the course, right up to and including level 18. I can look at any unit. Let's have a look at one of the reading passages, for example. The C units are reading practice, and we can actually see and do that activity. Incidentally, actually, while we've got that reading practice open, there is a little bit of a cheat that some students are using, and you can see this from their records. What they will sometimes do is they will go into that activity, click at random, but make a note of which ones they clicked at random, and then do the activity again, now knowing which are the correct answers. They don't even bother to read the passage. And a little bit of a bit of news for you is that we are actually in the process of significantly updating all of the reading passages to a different format, which also enables a whole range of other activities, including cloze exercises, synonyms, antonyms, and so on. So we will do our bit to stop students cheating in that way, but just so that you're aware that some students have worked out that that's how you can tackle that. So thank you, Liz, for your comment there. I'm glad you found it useful. That's wonderful. Thank you. Right, another query here, interesting. Hi Ros, I have an adult student who knows quite a lot but struggles with spelling. Can I allocate certain parts rather than have him do all of the activities? Yes, there is actually a way of doing it, and for an adult student, and believe me, I do not advocate this for your normal students, but for an adult student there is a different setting that you can use. Now, I'm just going to choose one of my students at random. When I go into Edit, Learning Settings, change to Exploration and Disabled. And then we go Save. Now just bear with me for a second because I'm actually going to sign in as this student and show you what that actually means. So just bear with me. So tdemo95, let's see if I can remember that. Let's go back to our website. Okay, let's try that. I hate to say this, but we usually use the same password, so aha. Right, there we go. This is the screen that an adult learner will see if you implement that setting. They will be able to go in to whatever level they are at. Let's say we're on level 5. And you could say, these are the activities I would recommend that you do. And you select yourself which activities to recommend. Give them a little list they can refer to. They are then not locked into a progression. So bear in mind, this enables free access to the whole program. You can access any level of the course with no restriction. You can also, in the same way, go into any level of word lists. So it's completely free access. And as I say, we don't recommend that for your normal students. But for an adult, it is a very appropriate setting. But do make sure they've got something to refer to when in terms of which activities you would like them to be doing. And actually, while we're on this screen, bear in mind that for every single activity there are printables. And one of the things which is particularly useful for your English language students is to display the sentences for that unit on the screen or printed out, and actually read through those sentences first before that student then tackles the other activities. You've made sure that they do know those words, they've seen those words in context, and then when they go into those language activities on StepsWeb, they will have much more chance of doing those accurately. Okay, lovely. Yes, okay, Liz. Exploration and what other key? Let me show you that process again. Yep, just bear with me. And please do remember, it is not a setting I recommend for ordinary students. Okay, so let's go through that process again. So let's say I'm going to do this with this student. I'll do this in a slightly slower. I was probably racing through it a bit too fast. Go to Edit, Learning Settings. There are two bits here. Mode. Focus is the mode that locks them into position. That is the standard default mode that we strongly recommend for your students. But for adult students, go to Exploration. And forced progression locks them into having to do every activity on the course in the right order. So disable that too. So it's those two settings that need to be changed. Focus needs to change to Exploration. Enabled needs to change to Disabled. And then you click Save. Then they will be able to log in and see the screen that we were just looking at. Right. Now, I'm not seeing any other questions coming through, so oh, hang on a minute. Yep, you're welcome, Liz. I think we might call it a day here because we've gone a little bit over time. Apologies for that. So I hope you find this a useful session. Please feel free to zap us an email if there's any other information you'd like, or any other help with particular aspects. But this is recorded, so you will be able to watch it again. It usually takes a couple of days to actually put it up on our website. So thanks again for joining us. It's always a pleasure, and thank you for your lovely comments and your questions. All the best.